It's a thing.
It is a thing.
It's a thing, y'all.
We might need t-shirts, or actually lace.
Merch. Yeah,
Lace
your
t-shirts.
antebellum.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I want merch for sure.
Merch.
Can't wait.
We've talked about it. It's the second episode. It must be coming.
Look out, guys! Merch drop coming soon.
Don't tell it to you. They're gonna fire us.
Yeah, guys, I swear to God, we didn't welcome back y'all merch for Impact Minded. Like, you guys have really jumped the shark on this one.
In spirit of our team firing us, we're talking about how coddling the cancer in your business is not the way to go. So I have an amazing question.
Love it.
You're going to hate this question.
Great.
I already know it.
Can't be more excited. Couldn't be more excited.
So maybe in leadership, like when you're starting a hard conversation, don't tell them they're going to hate it first.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like to not have that conversation well.
So, yeah. You're going to hate this anyway. Let me ask you.
That's my like soft blow. You're going to hate this. So my question today is, when have you been the toxic person or the cancer in the culture? Culture.
Yeah, you're right. This is good because I'm actually very clear on it. As much as it pains me to
admit that
to be this clear.
It actually was last week. I was trying to get you to talk about it.
Actually, this morning. 10 minutes ago. No, I mean, I for a long time, in my first couple of businesses, I was the problem for sure. I didn't, of course, didn't know that at the time, but the narrative was, why aren't people working? We just need to get work done. No one's as productive as I want them to be. We're not reaching our goals. We're not, I spent so much time and energy and stress and sleepless nights chasing down these really perceived or even like fabricated problems. Not that they weren't actually existing, but what was the impetus for those problems was me. I was not the leader that those people needed, because I wasn't clear on who I was supposed to be as a leader, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up. I wasn't clearly connected with mission, vision, and values. They didn't see that North Star clearly. There were so many pieces of the puzzle that were missing, and I was basing all of our meaning on productivity. And I thought that was the marker. And I thought my job as a leader was to just force that productivity forward. And, certainly at all costs. And that, I didn't know. I mean, there was a bit of it, not to make excuses for myself, or not that this is an excuse. There was some ignorance to begin with. I just didn't know. And then I knew, I think at some point, but the work required to kind of turn the ship seemed so insurmountable that I just put my head down. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about blind spots. I think that's one for sure. My blind spot was that was actually the highest and best use of my time. I just didn't want to admit that. And so I just kept blaming it on other people. For me, for a long time, like, I don't know, a decade, a long time. Yeah. Through multiple, different businesses, teams, pivots. It manifested for a long time. We've said like that, one of the reasons we really started Impact Initiative was because we had both been shitty leaders. I didn't have access to the tools. And I wish that I would have, truly. Like, I know that I would have taken action, because it wasn't fun. It didn't feel good. It was exhausting.
Yeah.
It was stressful. Business is hard enough as it is, like, without that layer, which is what kept me up at night so often. That was a big piece for us. You gotta answer the question too, because you put me on the hot seat. I'm just telling everybody that for like,
I didn't a great leader.
A decade of just a complete asshole.
Yeah. No, it was the same for me. And yeah, we do talk about that. Well, one of my most catastrophic stories, so I'll give a specific, was when I fired someone over paper towels. Literally told
Love
them to
this
get
story.
the fuck out of my house. I was like, get the fuck out. I was
House.
so pissed off over paper towels. That is not the way to fire someone. I probably could have been sued. It was not great. So if you're listening, I'm really sorry, and I hope you landed somewhere great
Thriving.
with a better leader than I was. I didn't have the hard conversations, and I would just like let them boil up, and then I would explode like a literal bomb. Like, have you seen Angry Birds? That was me. And people would, my nickname was RBF. They're like, RBF's coming. Hurry,
That's
like,
nice.
focus. Because I just was like, full steam ahead. I think that's why connection is so important to me now, because I've seen what it does when we live in a culture that's disconnected and nobody actually knows each other. Because I was the person that's like, hang your shit at the door. I don't want to hear about it. Like, I was such a, it's funny because Jordan, like, there's not very many people who knew me back then that are in our circle now, probably because I burned so many fucking
Yeah, because you scared them and they went somewhere else.
It was like, she's a bitch. I don't know.
No, I wouldn't be in that circle.
But like she was talking about it the other day, and it's funny to like think about who I am now. But that is probably like, I think I've swung the other way sometimes too much, that I'm like, I will take the time where you're like, okay, like we gotta get stuff done within our team. And I take so much time to know who people are and know and connect, because I was so epically bad about it. I'm like, I don't care what's going on. When you show up here, you need to be focused and you need to get your work done. And though I think that's partially true, like focus and getting our work done actually creates a happier person, it does matter what's going on at home. It does matter what's happening in your life. I do care about who people are. And it only took me a brain condition and almost a divorce to figure that out. But
small little speed bumps.
Small stuff, selling two businesses, all the things. So yeah, no, I've totally been the toxic person.
Yeah.
And the reason why I asked this question is because I don't want this to be a blame game. This conversation can get real blamey real quick. And I am someone who believes that people that I don't know about you, but I've never found a baby that's like, I'm like, that's toxic baby. That baby's gonna be toxic. So
some of those babies that don't stop crying, I'm like, that's a toxic baby. Baby's bad for our culture.
Yeah, maybe that. But like typically I don't think humans as a whole, there's not just like there's very few. I won't say there's not. I've learned my lesson with this. There's not just like toxic humans. So if you have someone who's toxic, it can be remedied. There is hope here. But we have to acknowledge it and we have to do something about it. So I think this conversation is really, really important today. And I want to talk about our blind spots, because the blind spots are the things that are actually perpetuating this problem and keeping us stuck here. So let's talk a little bit about leaders. As leaders, we have blind spots. For you and I, they were ourselves. But what does this look like? And how can we identify some of the blind spots in our company when there's toxic leaders, and it really does cost us. We'll talk about that in a second.
Starts with us for sure. So that's a blind spot. And I think that's probably one to always check yourself against. It's easy to, even if you have all the tools, it's just easy to fall into it. You're busy, you're tired, you're stressed. It takes effort. It is an active process to be a great leader. It takes a lot of energy, and some days it's hard to muster that energy amongst all the other things that you are required to do and responsible for. So I get that. So check yourself first. Next, very specific, when you start to make excuses for people, one of the classic blind spots is you say, oh, they do great work, but X, but they bring drama, they're late to meetings, they're whatever the thing is. So if you're using work as the qualifier, and kind of the measure of how that individual is or isn't a fit inside your organization. Overarchingly, that is wrong. We've talked a lot about work is a byproduct of someone being a great fit for your culture. So everyone has to work at work. So I don't think that that's really a fair or appropriate measure of how that person is or isn't, you know, being successful inside of an organization. I always say, like, businesses have a responsibility to create environments where people thrive. When that happens, they will also do great work. So culture needs to be the measure, the fit, what they provide and give back to the kind of collective energy of the organization. And yeah, we have stuff to do. Absolutely. You got to work, but don't hang on to a person because they do great work, but then you're making all these excuses. This is a classic blind spot. I know that I've done it. I think literally probably everyone has done this.
They're a top performer.
Yeah. Like, oh, well, I don't want to let, they do great work. They're getting their stuff done, sales or whatever, and then you start, no, there's no but. The thing that follows that, and all the qualifiers are the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can teach great work for one, right? The list goes on of so I think it's important to think about that equation. And so if that equation is unclear, or you have reversed it where you're leading with outcome and results, and then culture is a byproduct of that, I actually think the equation needs to be flipped.
Yeah.
Culture fit first, then they do great work. And actually watch how that changes.
Yeah.
If you have an individual who's not doing great work from like a KPI perspective, is it because they're not a great fit, or we haven't created an environment where that person thrives, so then their work suffers. So there's a bit of a kind of equation ratio piece there that I think is really important. But that's a blind spot. People that are disengaged, they're complaining a lot. Ultimately, if you start to see your A players shift into the behaviors of your non-A players, this is something to look out for. So we're talking about blind spots. So this might not be something that you're cognizant of, but it will happen, because we're talking about that this is a cancer in your organization. This is kind of a rot that happens from the inside out. So one of the blind spots is that we think it's only a problem with the one person, the toxic person, people. Hopefully, there's not a ton of them. What we're not paying attention to while that's happening right in front of us is that our A players are turning into B and C players. Mm-hmm. Because then that becomes the norm, becomes the standard for our business. Well, such and such is getting away with it. Why am I showing up working so hard? Right? Why do I care? Why can't I bitch and moan all the time? This doesn't take that much either. People start to shift. So there's a few things like blind spots to look out for. And again, this is something that you kind of have to come back to, and you have to be aware of. And the fact of the matter is that there's a real cost to coddling toxicity, and that's really the root of what we're talking about today. So let's get into the cost. We talked about some blind spots. Hopefully that's helpful. And just there's a bit of a mindset shift there. There's not a bit of a mindset shift. There's probably a massive mindset shift required. I know there was for me. It just took me like 10 years to figure that out. So I want to flatten that learning curve, and I want to open up that possibility and opportunity for a mindset shift to recognize, like, okay, here's some things I'm not looking for that are probably happening. How can I get ahead of it? And then once we recognize that, why does it matter to begin with? So what's the cost of this coddling?
I think the biggest one is definitely like you'll lose your best people.
Mm-hmm.
Your A players, you're going to lose them because they're not going to tolerate it. High performers want to be in an environment where they're challenged and they're valued for their work. And like we've said it, we don't want to be the smartest people in the room. We want to be around high performers. And so if you have someone who's toxic, then your high performers aren't going to stay. And then the biggest one too, or one of the biggest ones for me, is the clients. There's so many times you walk in and the first person you see is just that like really toxic person. And you're like, I'm not doing business with this company. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do business with this company. And so it might work for a while inside the organization. The people inside the organization might tolerate it, but your clients aren't going to. And I think we lose more business on this challenge than anything else, is not having the right people or toxic people in your seats, specifically client facing. I think that's a really big one. And then you're, like you said, your client or your culture is going to rot from the inside out, because we're just creating standards that it's okay, and then we're passing responsibility off on people, on your high performers also. So it just it really does. It looks like cancer. Like, when I think about this, it's like the one apple that spreads the mold, or like the strawberry, that's exactly what's happening. It just kind of rots everything from the inside out, and it becomes the norm. Like, this standard just becomes the norm, and it can happen really quickly. It's actually scary how quickly this can happen. And there was a stat that said 50% of employees say they'd quit immediately if they had to keep working with a toxic colleague. And that's extreme. 50% said, if you don't deal as a leader, if you don't deal with the person who's toxic in my culture, I will leave. I have zero tolerance for it.
Yeah. And I think that's, the narrative, and this is something we push back against, but the narrative is that it's hard to find people to work. It's hard to find. So, okay, if that's the case, you can't afford to have your people leave. It's too much effort to find their replacement. And half are not going to put up with it. It's something we can't afford. It's a blind spot we literally can't afford to have. It also, because rehiring costs 1.5 times the person's salary. There's really hard statistics out there that highlight the actual very real cost of, the life cycle to, like, that person leaves and to bring that other person up to speed. Also with, lost productivity, it takes about a year to get someone up to the same level of a senior staff member. So if half of those people aren't going to put up with it, like, you gotta solve it.
Yeah. Well, and the toxic people who are toxic and unhealthy have the tendency to stay where your high performers are going to leave, because they're just not confident enough. And people who are in a place of stress are not going to go make a change. Typically, if we look at brain patterns and all the things, those people are going to be the people who hang on because they're in scarcity. They're not going to have the confidence to leave. So if you don't do something about it, chances are you're going to see this turnover, and you're going to lose your best people, because they're going to be the ones who are confident enough and driven enough to leave. So you have to be the one to be the catalyst to call these things out. So let's talk about the cure. How do we actually fix this? Because if we just continue to coddle it, and I'm not saying these are patterns, right? We're talking about the patterns. We're talking about the things that we're seeing over and over. Maybe you've already identified this and you've had a couple conversations, or it's just extreme enough to be like, this can't continue. You're seeing real results from this. I'm not saying tomorrow walk in and don't be me, fire everyone who is just a little bit off, but the real toxicity in your culture, how do we address this? Obviously, like, we have to hit it head on and, like, look at this directly.
Well, the first one's to address it head on. And we've talked about this a lot. Clear is kind, and truly the most compassionate thing that we could do for an individual is to have a clear and direct conversation with them and highlight why there's misalignment. So often these people don't actually know that they're the toxic individual, and they might not be doing it, or so often they're not doing it intentionally. It's just because they're unhappy. It's not the right fit, or they don't have the tools and resources to shift that behavior because they don't know what they're shifting it against, right? They don't know what changes to make. And so highlight very clearly what that shift looks like, what is in alignment with your culture, and then give them the option. You can stay and make these adjustments and be in alignment with their culture, or you can leave. And truly, that is the most compassionate thing, because if they are not happy, if they're not the right fit, they can go be a culture fit elsewhere. They're not happy being that person. Again, businesses are there to create environments where people thrive. Those individuals are not thriving. and no one wants to feel that way. So addressing it head on is the first thing. And again, be very clear on what that looks like. So have a conversation based around very clear directives of how that individual can shift that behavior, or you would love to give them a great recommendation and then go find a culture that is a fit elsewhere.
And I think it's important to call that out directly. Like, hey, I've noticed a pattern of negativity, and let them know that there is this challenge that you've seen, and not just sidestep it. We see so many people just candy coating these conversations. That doesn't work. You need to be honest with them. Clear is kind.
Clear is kind. Getting clear on what your standard is.
Yep.
So again, you have to have something to kind of measure this against. I think this is one of the biggest issues, is that there is frustration. People aren't, we have a general sense that it's not going well. Some people are toxic, but what is the shift, right? We don't know what the standard is. So you have to get clear on what your standard actually is, make it known. This is how we do things, and this is not how we do things, right? There has to be a very clear measure of what those expectations are. So you have to have a culture. And I know this is an issue for people, and that's fair. So you got to start there, right? So, and that actually will be what sets things into motion in terms of recognizing those blind spots and things that we kicked it off with. Once you're clear on what that is, you have a standard, you're ready to have the hard conversations, invite them to step up or step out. So then, like you said, don't candy coat it. Don't drag them along. It's not we see people put people in 15 performance reviews. I'm like, this person's been on performance review for 2 years. Like, it's not working, right?
It's not working for them.
It's not working for them.
Nobody wants to live in that.
No, it's not
awful.
Again, they're not thriving. Give them the opportunity. People need the resources and tools to know how to make themselves better. If they want to step up, that's great. If not, after a very normal amount of time, an acceptable period where they've had the opportunity to do that, they should step out.
Yeah.
Because again, while that's happening, they are eroding the culture, which is impacting the outcome. And then once that's happened, the cure is that we need to re-inspire the team. So from a leadership perspective, make sure it is known what your mission and vision is. What's the direction you're going? Hey, I recognize that this, you don't have to call that person out, but you can certainly recognize and acknowledge that the culture has not been totally in alignment, and work to realign, get people back on board, help them see what their North Star is. How is their contribution meaningful? It takes some work, right? It's not a passive process. It's not just going to write itself. That's the point that I want to make, is just removing that toxic individual or individuals doesn't totally solve your problem. You still have residual, because people have adapted their behaviors to meet that toxicity. So you got to bring those A players back in line. You got to bring the people that are the right fit back into that culture. That's going to take some work from a leadership perspective. It's not a super heavy lift, but you got to be clear on what it looks like to take them in the right direction.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it also depends on how long it went on for.
Well, that's true.
We just dealt with a company that let it go on for literal years, and it was a key player in the company.
That's fair. Yeah.
And there's a healing process there. Like, we saw real healing that needed to be done with the individuals that stayed, and specifically the person who moved into the role to replace that person. Like, that cleanup process can be messy, and you cannot shy away from it. You have to create the space for people to heal. You have to create the space for you to reset those standards and expectations. And you got to talk about it. I think that's one of the biggest things. You got to talk about it. How many times have we seen leaders have this happen in their organization, and they just let the person go? They're like, okay, next. They replace the person. It's just like the elephant in the room. And people need space to be heard for this. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is you got to talk about it. You got to open up space. Even if it doesn't, you at least need to, even if it doesn't, people don't need it, you have to at least open the space for it. So if they do, you have tools there, because otherwise it's more damaging.
Totally. Yep. No, it's a fair point. And you're right. It actually can be, and honestly should be, a heavy lift when it's required. Like, there's a lot of damage that gets done. So
I think for us recently, there's not, I mean, I can't say that we've had anyone that was like massively toxic.
Yeah.
Like, so I think for us recently, like we have remedied and we have done the work to actually make sure that we're building business in this way. So we actually haven't had a lot of this, but we've worked with companies recently
Mhm.
in intensives and after, and it's brutal.
Yeah, totally. All right, so let's talk about what some specifics. So let's round it out. What are some specifics people can do? And I want you to think about a few things. So one, who on your team is bringing the energy down versus lifting it up?
Yeah.
So again, lead with culture. Don't think about output first. I know I'm going to say like they're doing good work. The people, I want you to try to shift that mindset so that you can actually just think about like the contribution of those individuals to the culture. So who on your team is bringing the energy down versus lifting it up? When you recognize that person or those people, what's the cost of keeping them another 6 months? I want you to be very, very honest about this. There's a very, very real cost there from a monetary perspective. Also, from a perspective of think about how that's going to have a ripple effect on your A players. That's actually the biggest cost. And then just know that like tough leadership decisions aren't just about removing bad people, they're about protecting the right ones. So again, there's a mindset shift here that is important. It's one that took both of us far too long to make. The real goal here is that we can help people see that early and often and flatten the learning curve there. So I just want people to leave with the recognition and understanding that one, there's a mindset shift here. I think that we need to think about in a very real and meaningful way what part of the problem is us. I think we all have on any given day a piece of that, for being brutally honest with ourselves. Think about our blind spots. So we gave you some, but just be honest about what those are and where they're at. And then be very proactive on the cure, and don't let it drag on, because it's having a very, very real and very high cost each day. So few places to get resources or support on this. One is our Service Hub networking group. That is an in-person group in Denver, Colorado. And the next meeting is on March 27th. And we're actually going to be talking a lot about how to identify your culture. So that is kind of part networking group as well as part facilitated workshop. The goal of that experience and group is that everyone walks away with very real tactical solutions to implement into your business to scale and grow your business, as well as support your team and the culture around your business. So we have a new topic each month. We meet on the fourth Thursday of every month. Again, the next one is on March 27th. It's at 3:00 at Tradecraft in Denver, Colorado. We'll put the information in the show notes as well as it's all over our social media. So that's one good resource. And then if you're not in Colorado, that's totally fine. Impactinitiative.network. You can reach out to us there, and we're happy to be a support mechanism and help you figure out any of this. Again, it is challenging, to your point. Like, I flippantly said it was a light lift. The fact of the matter is it's probably not, depending on how long it's gone on. And so unraveling and undoing these parts of our culture, as well as recognizing and identifying our blind spots, takes some very real work. And it really, I would have loved, and I know you would have too, to have some support and like facilitation, and that like coming to that conclusion on my own took far too long, and truthfully it just cost me way more money than I care to admit. I think about like what I could have done had I solved that problem more quickly, or seen that blind spot sooner. And yeah, I mean, I would be in a much different place right now.
Yeah,
Or those businesses would have been way more successful. I mean, and the teams, the list goes on.
yeah, the impact is just would have been completely different. And honestly, that's why we started the ad hoc calls, right? Is like half of Impact Initiative was founded on the fact that we were shitty leaders and learned a lot in the process. The other half is we really needed someone to call or someone to talk to and help us navigate those situations when we're like, I just don't know. I don't know what to do. This isn't working. I don't know. And being able to identify those blind spots. So yeah, But I think that's a huge reason why we do what we do, so that you can actually take care of your team and make a bigger impact. So
that's it.
Yeah.
Until next time, we'll see you on Impact Minded.